Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are the Ruins of Enduil playing as the forces of the Lizardmen against the forces of the Empire. And for this matchup we are definitely living the meme dream, because as was requested in a recent comment, we are running a mass flyer build as the Lizards, led by Tik-Taq-To. And as you probably saw in my tier list, my view of the Lizardmen Air Force is incredibly positive. It's definitely the best thing about the faction, and that's basically their primary strength. If it wasn't for their Air Force, the Lizardmen basically have nothing, so it's really great to abuse this sometime. Just kidding. You guys know I freaking hate it. But the Lizardmen Air Force does definitely have some potential. It's just that it's usually not utilized. And I decided to, make a build against Empire here. And try to make a build that can swarm them, that can still deal with the primary threats, while at the same time memeing it up a bit with all the various Lizardmen flyers. So my lord, we are running with, of course, with none other than Tik-Taq-To, and he's vanguarded up here with 2 units of Ripperdactyls as well as the Colossus Hunters, because there's just no other way you can do this. You have to vanguard with Tik-Tac. And if you're bringing him, it's got to be the meme dream. You got to bring all the Air Force you can fit in a roster. So Tik-Taq-To, of course, has some insane stats in the air. I was kind of hoping that my opponent would actually bring a Flying Lord. Karl Franz on Deathclaw or Boris on a Griffin is pretty popular in this matchup. So Blade of the Ancient Skies can definitely be a big boost there. Mask of the Heavens does grant a bonus to melee defense and armor for all nearby flyers. This is great. It actually applies even when you're on ground level, so it just requires that a unit be a flyer for it to take effect. Definitely a big buff. Sphere of Teapot can nuke some sort of clumped up infantry. Mash to the Skies gives us big melee defense buff. Really useful if we're on ground level, but can be useful up in the skies as well. Deadly Onslaught, of course, is a great buff to straight up damage output. And given that Tik-Tac does have AP damage, it's definitely not the measliest of buffs. Besides that, we do have a Skink Chief. This guy's mostly there to apply poison and support our troops. One of the things is that obviously Tik-Tac-To doesn't do poison damage, neither do Ripperdactyls. So getting poison debuffs is definitely a little difficult, and the Skink Chief is my answer to that. He can just shoot blow darts into, say, Demigryph Knights and debuff them. Finally, we have a Skink Priest of Heavens. This guy is coming in on a Pterodon, of course, because you gotta go with the build here. But he's got Roiling Skies. I was once again hoping my opponent would bring a flying army, but he didn't. Roiling Skies is insane aerial debuff. Minus 22 melee defense is pretty nuts. 24% speed debuff, definitely pretty crazy. We also do get Harmonic Convergence, Wind Blast, as well as Curse of the Midnight Wind. So 2 buffs to help our troops in the fight, and then Wind Blast, which should help our boys when they are, when we need to delete, say, unit of handguns, or Sterling Revenge, or anything like that. Finally, on this back corner here, we do have the Powerhouse Sentinels, as well as 2 units of Pterodons with Fire Leash Bolas. Now, I bash these guys a lot, but with this build, we don't have much to get at the enemy backlines, especially if the Ripperdactyls get tied down fighting enemy cav. So I wanted something that could kind of bombard handguns into submission. Finally, we do have a Horde of Skinks, and these guys are making up our front line. 5 units of Javelin Skinks, fronted by 3 units of normal Skinks. Just there to zone away enemy skirmishers, pound enemy infantry, that sort of thing. They're cheap chaff. They'll buy me time. Now for my opponent's build, he did decide to go with a relatively conventional composition. Rolling with Boris, this is probably the most unconventional choice here. Boris Todbringer mounted on a horse. Not much to be said for him. He's got decent melee stats. Ironically, normally Boris is not that good against lizards, because lizards tend to have high armor, or at least decent armor on their monsters. So Karl Franz is, in my opinion, the superior pick in most cases. But here, because we are doing this flying blob with very low armor, Rippers, of course, only have 30 base, or actually, my mistake. I guess they have 45 base, but it gets buffed up by 18 to 63, so still pretty terrible. Of course, Tik-Tac-To only has 48 with his armor buff, so normally 30. Against those, Boris will shine for sure. He also does have some crazy AoE debuffs. He's got the Curse of the Weak, which is great. White Cloak of Ulrich, of course, so my melee attack's going to be way down. Midland Runefang for his self-heals. Definitely going to be tough to kill him, and hold the line to buff his troops. He also does have 2 Demigryph Knights, one of them the Royal of Griffites. Terror potentially coming into play here. And finally, a Light Caster, who's bringing Barona's Time Warp, Fast Protection, and a Power Stone. So interesting combination, because he's not actually bringing net, so that was actually something I expected, but he did decide against it. Besides that, Silver Bullets, double handguns, and the Hammer of Witches making up the firing line. Definitely pretty potent stuff, can decimate big monsters quickly, and a front line of spears. So one of the primary targets here is going to be the handguns for sure. I can't do much about the Pistoliers, actually. They're just too quick. Now, they will get a cheeky charge in here against the Skink cohort, and you can see they're doing some damage there, but there's not really much I can do to stop these guys, to be honest. Javelins, I guess, but We're kind of going to ignore them, let them kite away, and in the meantime make moves to start dealing with this blob of infantry. And you can see in come the Ripperdactyls, led by Tik-Taq-To, diving in on these handguns and really putting them to pound town. You can see these guys are suffering pretty bad, and my hope here was to melt these guys as quickly as possible. Windblast is going to go down here in the back line, decimating these silver bullets, but actually not wiping any models, so that was definitely rough. I'd hope that would do much more. Fast Protection does, or Barona's Time Warp does go down, and that's going to allow these Demigryphs to close the gap and get a full-blooded charge on my Rippers, which is bad. Like, I was hoping that this would not be the case. The Rippers need to stay alive, but they're getting countercharged here. I didn't take off fast enough, didn't route these handguns fast enough. I'd actually expected the guys to route quick, and they didn't. I probably should have gotten a pincer, but I didn't. And so these guys are now not routing, and suddenly things are looking a bit grim. Now, we are going to counteract my opponent here with the Curse of the Midnight Wind. He has dropped Frost Protection, so a whole bunch of buffs and debuffs going down here. The Rippers are struggling. They're getting destroyed here. Focus Instincts is keeping us in the fight, preventing Rampage. We do have Toad Rage going down, or it's already might have gone down. But we're tearing these guys apart once the Frost Protection goes away, but as long as it's active, it's very difficult to get much done. And now the Hammer of Witches is pounding away, and I have not shut it down. That said, the Teardown Riders with the Fire Leech bullets here, decimating the handguns. So in a blob, it's difficult for the handguns to do much, and they get shredded pretty quick. Only 20 armor, not much protection there. The Pistoliers, in the meantime, are going to get zoned out a little bit by the Skinks. So this is very important, because right now, if the Pistoliers get free reign on my Rippers, this is going to be one quick battle. But because we were able to zone them out with the Skinks, things might go a bit better. In the meantime, the Colossadons are still on 6 models. Tik-Taq-To is in there, giving it his all. And the Rippers, they're sticking around for now. One of them did get temporarily routed, but it's not the end. The Light Wizard, in the meantime, getting harassed here. The Skink Chief is pounding him with his darts. The Skink Priest was shutting him down. And we are sort of barraging my opponent. You can see we're actually going to sick our Pawhouse Sentinels over here on these handguns and start swinging in for the rear charge. So Demigryph Knights, for those of you who don't know, do not necessarily have the best leadership for a heavy calf. And so if we get a rear charge here, there is potential to break them. And so the Demigryph Knights here, leadership wavering, buckling, and we are actually going to be able to break them off, which is crucial. 10 models of Demigryph Knights heavily chevroned up is a big win to remove from the field. In the meantime, Tik-Tac and the Colossadons were actually temporarily routed by the Royal of Griffites, but we are able to re-engage here. Unfortunately, the rest of our Rippers are basically almost gone, but certainly we are giving a pounding to these Royal of Griffites, and we are able to sort of break them apart and shatter them. In the meantime, over here, our Skink Priest is trying to shut down the Silver Bullets, doing so at the cost of his life. Our Skink Chief is somewhere. I'm not even sure where he went. He's still over here, chipping away at this Light Wizard, who is now being routed. So some big wins all around. Unfortunately, the Hammer of Witches, who I really should have shut down much earlier, is still online. And although we are going to be able to rat off some of these troops, the POW Sentinels diving in to chase off the Griffites, not all is great, certainly. The Rippers here are going to surround Boris, and I actually kind of wasn't sure if we were going to win this, but you can see they're doing a lot. The Colossadon Hunters, with their bonus versus large of 10, their monstrous weapon strength and all that stuff, are doing, you know, quite a number on this guy. Boris, not a specialist against large, and he is struggling here. 55 melee defense, not holding up. These guys have insane melee attack, which is definitely a big benefit here, and they're just tearing him a new one. Meantime, the Pistolier is still being zoned away, but my opponent has gotten a big win for himself here. The Tik-Tac-To has been routed, and I'm not going to be able to save him. Now, Tik-Tac-To is simply going to rout. He's not going to come back, and that's going to be a difficult situation for me. Because leadership buckling, Lizards, normally Lizards are a faction where you don't worry too much about leadership losses, even though obviously you never want leadership losses. It's not something too concerning. But in this case, with a relatively low leadership army of Skinks, Terror Riders, and units like that, it's going to be a problem. So Tik-Tac-To being removed from play is a huge win for my opponent, and Boris is getting pounded, so potentially we can get a trade here, but, you know, Boris here, he does stabilize. You can see he is now on, or sorry, he doesn't stabilize, he does rout, but these Demigryphs stabilized, and that's going to be a problem. So these Demigryphs are pushing in here, and instead of taking the full brunt of the Demigryph charge, I pull away. And this was a huge misplay. What I should have done here was countercharge the Demis. Instead, what I do is take to the air, and this does mean I get a charge on the Demigryph Knight. So yes, a great win. But in the meantime, the Demigryphs will sort of get put. Yeah, we get push them off, but now the Pistoliers are in there, and the Rippers must flee. The Rippers cannot stay in there to get shot up by those little pistols, and that is a huge win for my opponent. Boris can steal regen. He still has the Midland Runefang. There's still some Demigryphs on the field, and there's still a horde of Pistoliers, so things are looking grim. Tik-Tac-To is gone. My opponent has leadership benefit. Now, certainly, Bounce of Power is in my opponent's favor, but he is going to make a pretty nasty maneuver here. He's going to start swinging in, and the Skinks, who've been trading it out with these spears for ages now, are suddenly going to find themselves in a rough spot. As the Demis, Boris, the Fear, the debuffs from Midland Runefang start coming into play, these guys will start breaking. And the Skink's line is buckling. So in the meantime, the Colossadon Hunters and the Rippers here diving into the spears, trying to force a break, but this is kind of a suicide effort almost. Because the Colossadons and the Rippers definitely not meant to fight spears. They're very squishy, very soft. We are trying to get our Pterodon Riders with Fire Leech Bulls in there, but it's still a difficult position. These Rippers here are buckling. Their leadership just not able to hold up. Clawstone Hunters in very bad shape. And things are suddenly looking very good for my opponent. Pistoliers, though, being zoned away by the Skinks once again. I want to keep these Pistoliers away. I do not want them fighting my Ripperdactyls because they are my last ace in the hole. And Balance of Power is now swinging wildly back towards my opponent's favor. But you know what we're going to do? We're going to sit here and we're going to start chipping away at my opponent's Boris. And we are going to get some shots in there. You can see the Skink Priest chipping away, doing his very best there. Unfortunately whiffing a few shots, and Skink Priest of Heavens here is going to get shut down. He's going to get pounded pretty hard. So there's 3 Demigryphs still sticking around to the bitter end, an absolute pain in the rear. But you know, Fire Leech Bullets against this clump are going to start raking in some value. So as much as I hate this unit and bash on it, it is definitely able to net some value here when my opponent clumps like this. In the meantime, the Skinks escape because with only 1 cavalry unit nearby, my opponent doesn't have the tools to intercept them. We actually get a nice little pickup here as our Skinks do interdict these Pistoliers as they try to sweep past them. My opponent wasn't paying attention. And as bad as the stats on Skinks are, Pistoliers are even worse, and trapped in the pits like this, they will get dragged down by those Skinks with their little wooden paddles and their prison shakes, their spears, if you want to call them that. They are going to drag those guys into the muck. Now that said, things definitely not looking great. We do manage to pick apart the Demigryph, so you can see on 3 models, some insane stuff here. These guys on 3 models and only 28 HP. Like, how does that happen? But either way, the Demigryphs are not routed, but they finally do shatter. Holy hell, just insane stuff. And now we are trying to chip away at these enemy troops. We are trying to remove the stragglers. And my opponent in the meantime is pushing in with his spears, trying to chip away at my Skinks. Fortunately, wasting a lot of his ammo here with the skirmishers on his Skink cohorts, on my Skink cohorts, which is a big win for me. Means that a lot less ammo will be available to dispatch my Skink Chief, my Pile Sentinels, my Skink Priest, and my Rippers. Unfortunately, the Clawstone Hunters have been removed from play. They got routed off earlier. And now Boris is diving in. This is really going to be the crux of the matter here. Is Boris. Boris still has 2,000 HP. He still has a bit of healing left to go. Certainly not a lot, but in a match like this, that tiny bit of healing can be all the difference in the world. And my opponent still has these critical spearman units. These spears, honestly, not the greatest unit, but in this situation where everything is on the line, my Pterodons are mauled, and none of my units have good armor or sort of great anti-infantry prowess, it's potentially the game changer. Now, you can see we're out of ammo here on our Fire Leech Bulls, so no more dealing with his blob. Darts from the Skink Chief are whittling down the Boris. Will begin shortly. We do actually drop some rocks there to damage these guys, but not too much going on. And the Skinks are starting to break. Boris, of course, applying that constant debuff in this AoE, buffing his spears. Fortunately, one of the big wins for me here is the fact that my opponent's caster is off the field. So in this mishmash fight, where Barona's Time Warp, a Foz Protection could make the difference between life and death for these Skinks, or for the spears for that matter, my opponent does not have it available. So in this pit fight, state troops fighting against the Skink cohorts, that is one little benefit we have going for us. In the meantime, we are chipping away at Boris, and this is going to be a big one. Wind Blast goes down, decimating these spears, just exploding them into bloody gibbets, and just demolishing this line. And suddenly my opponent's army is collapsing. Seconds ago, it was Bounce Power was swinging in his favor, and now in come the rear charges. Devastating and brutal. The Pistoliers had committed there to try to break those Skinks, and suddenly things are looking grim. We are able to surround these spears, and now it's important to keep in mind that there's a huge edge I'm going to have in coming out of this fight. So my opponent right now, you can see his Pistoliers here running away. They're going to escape my Skinks, but all his infantry will not be able to escape. Skinks have 46 speed baseline, obviously less so if Boris has his less so if Boris is buffed up, but they have a lot of mobility. They can catch these spears, and as my opponent routes, we are going to start pursuing them to the bitter end. So all of our Skinks are going to detach. Over here, we're going to take our Pallid Sentinels to pursue the Pistoliers, and now our Ripperdactyls are being committed in against Boris down to their last 450 HP. They actually gained a Chevron this fight. We hit him with a Harmonic Convergence, and we are trying to bring the Toddbringer down and doing our very best here. Unfortunately, the Ripper's actually getting dissuaded here, distracted, not able to really land the hits. Boris is landing some hits, and they're actually going to break. So disaster strikes. We still had some time on Harmonic Convergence there. Or actually, we didn't. It just expired, so I lied. But we don't get huge value. So because Boris just held up there. And we do throw in our Pterodon Riders with the Fire Leech Bulls, looking to get any opening. We're going to start cycle charging with our Skink Chief and our Skink Priest, trying to deal with the Toad. But he has 2,000 HP still. This is a really tough situation for me. Because everything else here, we're gonna win the army fight. Like, these Skinks will mop up all these troops. The Pistoliers are out of ammo. These Spearmen will get overrun by the Skinks. Skink cohorts rallying and coming back. So all of that is great. We still have the POW Sentinels, which is one ace up the hole, potentially, or ace up the sleeve for us. They're chasing off the Pistoliers here. They could potentially come back. But that said, dealing with Boris is a bit of a brutal fight here. We are trying to deal with him. He actually massacres the Pterodons with Fire Liege Bolas to a man, so their leadership held out better than the Rippers there, which is pretty nuts. Skink Chief does dive in looking to cycle charge Boris, but it's just not happening. Boris has 55 melee defense. He's a really solid combatant. Like, his stats are not bad. Boris' main problem is that he just doesn't have AP, but his actual combat stats are solid. And so he's sitting around here on his Bard of Wars. He's got 105 armor. Less because he's exhausted, but still he's probably like 70 effective. And he's a tank in it. And we do try to cycle charge in there with our Skink Priest, trying to get those rear charges in on the Todd, but it's just not enough. So now we're just sitting here, sniping away with the blowpipe, looking to get as much damage as we can. And I kind of figured, you know what, let's try to proc army losses. Take our Skinks, run these boys off the field. To get these Spearmen, leave, just get them away. We've got 46 speed on all our boys, get them going. Pistoliers, they've shattered. Those Pistoliers were removed from play entirely, so now it's just a handful of spears that need to be mopped up, and Boris himself. But of course, Boris, you know, he's still holding the balance of power at a steady sort of 70% for me, so 30% for my opponent still has a chance, potentially, if there are some routes that trigger, especially with the Crush the Weak. But fortunately, balance of power is starting to swing in my favor. Those handful of darts that I'm investing into Boris here, the last 2 darts going in, are starting to swing the tide. Boris is debuffed. Those darts just chipping away at him. Another one goes in, does about 60 damage. It's not impressive, right? But it's something. We pop Cold Blood on the Skink Horde to keep their leadership up, to just prevent them from routing. And Boris is now wavering. He's now at the edge of his endurance. The Skink Chief is out of ammo. He's diving in. And it's going to be a sort of just a pit fight. You can't see the Skink Chief. They're chipping away at Boris with the rear charges. And a Pyrrhic victory for the Lizards, as the forces of the Empire are forced to flee. So great game to be on you here. And obviously one that was cut. Admittedly, this build is definitely a bit beamy. It's not like the most. It's not a competitive build necessarily. So that obviously impacted the game there. But definitely a very sort of fun engagement. I actually didn't even realize these guys were only Demigryph Knights, so that's something I just realized. But regardless, the build here was definitely a bit of a silly one. Some things worked surprisingly well. The Skink Priest of Heavens, of course, saved our bacon a little bit, dealt with some of those silver bullets, dealt with some of those guns, and especially the Spearman was very valuable. The Skink Chief, of course, great at shutting down the caster, which denied my opponent in the long run. The Rippers performing surprisingly well against the Chevron up Demis, against the Royal Gryphites, and Boris. One of the big problems there was the fact that my opponent actually had his Pistoliers helping. He had the Hammer of Witches helping. There was a lot of fire going in, so it wasn't as clean-cut of a fight as one would have hoped. And despite that, the Rippers held. They slided out. They tore apart those Demis. Ultimately, a lot of these kills were against Demigryph Knights. Of these 60 or 70 kills they got, 69 I guess. Most of that was against the Royal Gryphites and the Demigryph Knights. The units were actually wiped to a man, and the Demigryphs were almost wiped to a man. So, and most of that was Ripper work. The Fire Liege Bolas performed surprisingly well, as much as I hate on the unit. It did do well here against the handguns, just swarming them with sheer volley of fire. And that proved indispensable, because we didn't really have other tools to deal with the guns, and having those guys to deal with that damage there was good. One big misplay, of course, was getting Tik-Taq-To and the Horde of Rippers caught on the ground against the Gryphites and the Demigryph Knights. Had I been able to take to the air again, things might have turned out a bit differently there, because I could have avoided my opponent's charge. I could have ensured I got the charge off on him. That would have been a much better trade in my opinion, but what can you do? Finally, letting the Hammer Witches just pound away was a huge mistake. It got 11 kills. I know some of those, or I believe some of those were in the early game when it took some pot shots at my Skinks, but like I'm pretty sure a handful of those were Rippers, and that's an unfortunate loss to take. Tik-Tac unfortunately kind of flunked. He got wrecked by Boris. He did provide those AoE buffs, which helped the Rippers stay in the fight, but poor Tik-Tac did get shredded by Boris, by the Pistolier fire, ultimately routed. I think if Tik-Tac had actually stuck around, this battle might have been a little less close. It might have helped because the leadership issue wouldn't have been so crucial. But there is the flyer build for Lizards. Obviously not entirely flyer. You can't really do that in my opinion, but mostly flyer build. And it did work. I do think it's I think it's something you can pull off, but mostly because people don't expect mass flyers from Lizards. And the Lizardmen flyers, especially the Rippers, are not terrible. It's more like they're very niche and risky, but you could definitely make them work. They've got a lot of AP. They've got a good melee attack, very solid leadership, so they're overall pretty stable units. And here they performed pretty admirably. But regardless, well played to my opponent. My main critique for his build would have been, well, first of all, why not bring halberds? Why bring normal Demigryph Knights? I don't really see the point there. You might not be able to put, like, if you're going to Chevron them up anyway, like, ditch a Chevron, essentially, and get yourself normal Demigryph, or Demigryph Knights with halberds. I call them normal Demigryph Knights because they're so standard, but Demigryph Knights with halberds. My other critique is the fact that he didn't really defend his backline appropriately. His Pistoliers got a lot of kills, but it was mostly against Skinks. They never really interfered with the Rippers, and the guns didn't really shut down my Rippers either. In my opinion, my opponent needed to sort of pick apart targets one at a time, and instead he didn't really focus anything. His guns could have unloaded on the Skink Chief and removed him from play probably within seconds. Same with the Skink Priest. But because they were kind of a distracted, shooting back at my Pterodactyls or Pterodons, which are a much lower priority target, I was able to get a Wind Blast on the Silver Bullets. I was able to get the Skink Chief just chipping away at the Light Wizard. And by the time my opponent rallied, the handguns were routed from the field, and everything was over. That's really my main critique. There was not really protecting the backline, and that oddball choice of Demigryphs. Like, I guess if you want to deal with Saurus or Temple Guard, they're a better choice. But if you're worried about Saurus or Temple Guard, you're just gonna have to cycle charge them anyway. You're gonna have to flank and gun them down from all sides anyway. So why bother with normal Demigryphs, in my opinion? But regardless, that was it for the game. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you had fun. And if you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and share. If you have any comments, critique, questions, don't hesitate to put them down below, and I'll do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.